Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa ala rasulillah. So, today we're going to be speaking about science and spirituality. Okay? Now, this is supposed to be a lecture, but I want it to be more like a conversation. Yeah? And the more you guys participate, the more fun it's going to be. Okay? So, if you don't participate, I'm going to start picking on you. So, it's better for you to volunteer. So, science and spirituality. So, I just want to raise of hands first, right? How many people today believe that there's a perception in the world that science and religion, science and spirituality, these things do not go together? This is the perception in the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, good. Right? How many people think there's no conflict? Well, you can't be... Okay, so most people are so undecided. A few people saying, okay, there's no conflict. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is this. There's a category mistake when we say science is against spirituality. Because science is an experiment, a method, right? It's the application of reason to the natural world. So science is the experiment, spirituality is the experience. It's something different. So when someone tries to say this experiment and this experience, they're in conflict, what's the mistake that they've actually made? I've sort of given you the answer, but what's the mistake that they've actually made? So what's the mistake they've actually made when it comes to science and spirituality? When someone says there's a conflict between the two, what's the mistake they've made?
They haven't tried the application yet, maybe.
They haven't tried the application? Yes, potentially. That's a good way of putting it. So they haven't tried the application? Yes.
There's an assumption that the origin isn't the same for both of them.
There's an assumption that the origin isn't the same for both of them. Okay, explain what you mean.
I mean, like when people look at spirituality,
Yes.
obviously as Muslims we believe spirituality is from God.
Yes.
But when people look at science, they somehow are confounded by the idea that science can't be from God, that spirituality is God's realm. Science is completely something different.
So you're saying they make a false dichotomy.
Yes.
They say the origin of spirituality is like God and the origin of science is like, human beings, and they're in conflict.
Yeah.
Very good point. Anyone else want to add? Why is there a conflict between these two? Yes.
तो इसमें एक चीज़ की है कि साइंस में हम कोई चीज़ सेट इन स्टोन नहीं है, मतलब हर चीज़ आता है अपनी थ्योरी लेकर आता है, वो वक्त के साथ साथ इवॉल्व होती जाती हैं, तो हम हर चीज़ को एक लाइक द पिंच ऑफ सॉल्ट लेते हैं.
Yes.
स्पिरिचुअलिटी में वो सेट इन स्टोन चीज़ें हैं, कोई
Very good. Very good. I'm just going to repeat what he said because not everybody can hear. What he's saying is that spirituality is seen as something true. When science is in flux, it can be revised. So it's seen like you can't really have these two things being equated when this is something of a different realm, a different domain, and this is something which is more proximate, tentative, and can change. Okay, good. So now the question is, what are we doing today? Okay, so what we're going to do today, I'm going to try and have a conversation with you guys as much as possible. We're going to cover this content. Why is there a need for spirituality? What is science and what is scientism? The battle between scientism and spirituality, the absurdity of scientism, and why science and spirituality can actually work together. Okay, as a quick show of hands, how many people here have heard of scientism? 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. How many people think, even if you don't know the meaning, how many people think scientism is something different, very different to science? Okay, so the people who didn't hear about scientism before this talk, can you have a wild guess what you think scientism is?
Is it related to Scientology?
Okay.
Religion related to science?
Very good guess. Scientology. Anyone familiar with Scientology? Scientology is actually a religion. So it sounds similar to scientism, but it's not. It's actually a sort of religion. Anyone else want to have a guess what scientism may be? How it's different to science? None of the sisters have spoken yet. I'm going to have to pick on you then. Yes, there you go.
The way, the tools or techniques of doing science, of carrying out the scientific experiment or something like that? Something of the sort?
So repeat that again. I didn't quite catch you.
The tools or techniques to carry out the scientific
Yes.
experiment or theories.
Yes. So that would be science, to the tool of the application of reason to a natural world, experimentation, observation. That would be science. Scientism, ISM, it denotes a worldview. Yeah? There's actually a worldview. There's actually something else going on. Okay, so what we're going to do today is, the objective today is to make sure that by the time every single one of you leaves, you are sure that science and spirituality are not in conflict. And the way I want to do this talk is that if you disagree with the content, feel free to say, I disagree, that doesn't make sense to me, could you repeat that again? Yeah, so it's not going to be a one-way conversation. Firstly, the picture I have here, he happens to look like Saad, who I just pointed out right now. Pure coincidence. Pure coincidence, both exhausted. Okay, so first thing is, I want you to imagine right now, this person is you, because this is you. How many of you are right now, you're working on either a final year project, or you're working on something to do with some personal family dispute, or something difficult, something stressful in your life, personal, financial, professional, whatever, something stressful in your life? Raise your hands. Okay? At almost any given moment, if I'm to go to a marketplace and take a picture, when you take a picture and you've got 50, 60 people, take one of those people and ask them, are you worried or stressed about something in life? Yeah? Is there a financial problem you're going through? Are you looking for a job? Are you not happy with your boss? Are you having a marital problem? Are you not married? Are you having problems with your mother-in-law? Are you happy with your mother-in-law? What's going on? Is there, I don't know, are you finding it very difficult to actually get good grades? Right? Something. Chances are the person's going to point out something in their life that they're not happy with. Okay? So right now, I want you, I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about 3 things that you're worried about in terms of finance, your professional life, your personal life. So I'll give you a few seconds. Think about 3 things. And that image is, helpful. Because when we look at people, an interesting thing happens. We have this empathy where we start putting ourselves in their shoes. That's if you're not a psychopath, yeah? If you're a human being, you'll start to feel that. Okay, does everyone have something that they're stressed about? Okay. But then I want you to consider that we're on this lonely planet, yeah? You're one human being amongst billions. The way to think about it is if each human being was a drop, then we have an endless ocean and you're just one drop. Okay? And the human beings alive today, in 100 years from now, they will not be alive. And 100 years ago, the people that were alive, they're no longer alive. Go back to what year is it now? 2020. So 1920s. Click tonight, 1920s images of India, because Pakistan didn't exist at the time, of Indonesia, of the UK. Look at the pictures of the people. Each one of those people, they're worried about some financial issue, some personal issue, some problem that they have. What's a good grade here in NUST? Like, what's a good grade if you want to get into a good university? What is it, like 3.8? 4? Who gets 4 out of 4? What's the actual system called here? Because it's different to the UK. It's GPA or something? GPA. What's a good GPA to get into a good job? 3.5. 3.5. So how much percentage is that? 80%. Okay? So imagine you worked really hard, your parents sold land to get you into university, and then you had stress or you failed your exams and you ended up with a 2 out of 4. You'd be distressed. So likewise, 100 years ago in 1920s, people had these issues. They had this issue of, I'm not doing well, my health is not so good, this is happening. But I just want you to remember something. Each and every single one of those people, they no longer exist. And their problems are dust in history. There's no thought process going on right now. No one's worried about a personal relationship, a financial problem, a professional problem, or some other issue. Someone said something to them and they're offended by it. Somebody wrote them a comment on Facebook they don't like, so they're replying. All those things are gone. And in 100 years from now, everything you've done in this life, in terms of your personal life, things that you're really, really worried about, they're just going to be dust. And you're just one human being amongst billions in an ocean of people on a planet which is one planet in a small part of the Milky Way galaxy. Where are we in this galaxy? Anyone point out where we are? We're just somewhere in there. It's irrelevant where we are, because what we can see is that we are insignificant. We're totally insignificant. Yeah? So there's two things. There's two things that makes human beings crave for meaning, for purpose, for value, for spirituality, which is meaning. What is the driving force of these things when we think about the finitude of our lives? The finitude of our lives. How short our lives are. Right? If we take a tape from that end of the room to that end of the room, and on this tape we put down all of the human beings that ever lived and all of their problems, you're just like one microfilm in that history of humanity, and if you are deleted, the film is still the same. If you die tomorrow, you think the world ends, but actually the world will just carry on. Right? You could think about anybody in your family that's passed away, the world just carries on. So what makes us go towards this meaning, value, purpose, spirituality, this drive, is the finitude of life and also the suffering in this life. Because when you believe what you're going through has a deeper meaning, then you are willing to put up with it. Okay, how many people here, they know of somebody who's a crazy gym enthusiast? Like they're crazy about going to the gym. 1, 2, okay. Now when you go to the gym, do you go through a lot of physical pain? If you do it properly, you should be going through a lot of pain. Why do they do this? What's the point? What's the point of putting yourself through that pain when you go to the gym? What's the reward? Looking healthy, huh? Right? So it's for a benefit. But if in your life you're going through suffering and there is no next life, there is no spiritual dimension that you're looking forward to, then life becomes very pointless and meaningless. So the quest for spirituality is driven by what? What things did I mention? What is this quest for spirituality, this drive towards spirituality? What's it driven by? What's some of the factors I mentioned? Finitude, fantastic. What else? Suffering. Purpose is a part of it. So all of these things, they drive us to ask, what is the point of it all? Are you guys all like in your 20s roughly? Yeah. So I'm in my 30s. I'm about 10 years older than you guys. So you have to call me uncle, but you don't have to. So I'll give you something which it may not sound rational to you, but once you experience it, you will know it. When you have a higher goal you want to achieve, and you're striving towards that goal, that's the time when you're the happiest. When you reach that goal, give it a few days and you recognize that that goal isn't as important as you thought it was. It happens all the times. It happens when we really want to work hard to get a phone, a brand new phone. When you get it, you know, a few days, a few months, it starts getting old. Yeah? So this is the reality of life. This makes us look for meaning. We want to know, why do we exist? What's the point of life? What's going to happen after we die? Right? So we have this thirst of spirituality. Okay, before I carry on the lecture, what's one way that people try and escape these inevitable questions about spirituality? What's one way people busy themselves? Materialism, fantastic. Listening to music, right? Getting into these habits of, okay, let me try this, let me just try and be popular. That becomes a purpose of life, right? But all of these types of things, these are escapes, right? It's an escapism philosophy, which is, let me just escape these thoughts. So like yesterday, I was listening to a lecture of a scholar and he was saying, look, those people who are continuously listening to music and dancing and they're happy, if they were happy, they wouldn't need to continue doing that. They could be happy without doing that. But it's a type of escapism. And people that I know who accepted Islam, and they're the ones who can give you some insight into the world of living a life truly without God, a hedonistic life, they say this is hedonism. This was an escapism that they were living through, that they were just busying themselves with these things to get away from the deeper meanings of life. Now, the evolutionary psychologist Jonathan Haidt, it's hard to pronounce his name, but the second name, but he's got loads of interesting TED Talks. So he obviously tries to give a naturalistic explanation for our craving of what? Spirituality. So since he tries to give a natural explanation, since you guys are smart enough, what type of explanation is he going to give? Darwinian. Perfect. Darwinian explanation. Okay, now here's the more difficult question. Why would someone like him resort to a Darwinian explanation and not, say, a Buddhist explanation or some other type of explanation?
Because their worldview is survival and reproduction.
MashaAllah. Their worldview is survival and reproduction, i.e. their worldview is mechanical. So when you have a mechanical worldview, you can't start off on something that is like a religious idea or a concept. You have to go to the base level. Because you have to remember, from a purely material, secular, atheistic perspective, linguistics, biology, psychology, all of these things break down to chemistry. Chemistry breaks down to physics. Physics breaks down to, you know this, to maths. So from a purely naturalistic perspective, they have to give you a Darwinian account, right? Now he gives a very powerful analogy. He says that we human beings are homo duplex. We're multi-leveled, like a house, right? So he has this really powerful analogy. What he says is, he says, imagine you walk into a house, right? And as you know, walk into a house, your mind has many doors. Your mind has many doors, right? And one of the doors you open and it looks like that. You've got these stairs that go up, and as you go up the stairs, you get into a different dimension. And he says, this is the reality of human beings, that we have two levels, according to him. These two levels are the level of the profane, the lowly level, the selfish level, the selfish gene level, right? The basic level of survival and reproduction and this type of stuff. Then he says we have a level which is, he calls the sacred level. By the way, he's not a religious person. He's just giving you an evolutionary account of spirituality. Yeah? He says it's a sacred level. This is a lowly level. This is a sacred level. And he says that we get past our selfishness and we want to and we are happiest in this level of the sacred, and this level, he says we are self-transcendent. Okay, so how is being self-transcendent different to the level of the profane, which is the low level, which I mentioned earlier? This is just to make sure you guys are awake. What's the difference between the two?
So profane is all about me, me, me.
Yes.
About the other, about the whole community.
Fantastic. Profane levels, me, me, me. It's about me. Can I get some water, please? One of the brothers. So, it's about me, me, me. But the level of the sacred is a level of thinking beyond yourself. Right? So, I am not going to think about myself alone. I'm going to think about something greater. I want to connect with something greater. So, I thought this was a good analogy to explain spirituality, right? Or the craving of spirituality. Because there's something which I want you guys to realize. And that thing is this. Even within secular academia, there's a whole discussion about... Just give me a second. Within secular academia, there's a whole discussion about spirituality. And they have to give, like you said, a Darwinian explanation of spirituality, because like you said, that's what they have. They have only mechanics. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at their explanation of spirituality, and we're just going to objectively look at whether it actually makes sense. Right? So we obviously as Muslims, we have an answer for why we are spiritual, which we're going to cover in the end, inshallah, right? But what we want to do now is we want to enter into a discourse with the secular perspective, from the secular perspective, and we want to see whether it holds any weight, whether it actually makes any sense. One thing that I'm really happy with, right, which wouldn't have been true, say 30 years ago, this idea of spirituality, it was like, no. We human beings, we believe in science, we believe in reason, we believe in logic, we believe in these things. Who on earth needs spirituality? That's for ancient primitive people. That's for people who didn't understand the world. Yet today, in the world, spirituality is something that's part and parcel of human behavior. A few years ago, I went to a college, and the college was outside of London in a little village type town area, and these areas usually they're more conservative, more Christian than cities. Cities are usually more secular people. But anyway, here there was supposed to be a faith talk in which we had a Buddhist, a Muslim, an atheist who was also at the faith day, and some other religious type people. And before going into the event, and obviously the event, everyone's trying to give their worldview, including the atheist, the head teacher of the school, I had a conversation with her before. So as you should do, since it's an open forum where you can discuss things, and she invited obviously people, you can openly ask people about God, because usually asking people about God directly is sometimes seen as offensive, right? People don't really like, you're asking me a bit of a personal question here. So I asked the head teacher, I asked her, do you believe in God? Do you believe that there is a creator? And she said, I'm not religious. She said she's an atheist, but she said, but I am spiritual. I am spiritual. Even this evolutionary psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, even he, during a TED talk, he asks the audience, right? He says to the audience, who here is religious? And it's like a few people, right? And he jokes, I don't really expect this many religious people at a TED talk. And then he says, and remember, this is a secular audience, right? He says, who amongst you is spiritual? And the majority of the audience put up their hands. Okay, before we continue, quick question. Why is the existence of spirituality a problem for naturalism or atheism, if spirituality really is a real thing? Now obviously he's trying to explain it away, and others, as we're going to see, they're going to try and explain it away. But why conceptually, if spirituality is real, what happens to the atheist worldview? That's a question, by the way.
Their mechanical dimension.
Sorry, say that again?
That spirituality transcends their mechanical dimension.
Perfect. That spirituality transcends their mechanical worldview. Perfect. Yes, you were saying?
I was going to say that supports the Islamic sort of stance of fitra, that everyone is born on the fitra.
Yes.
Therefore, everyone is naturally spiritual and thankful.
Good. So then automatically it starts to fit within a theistic worldview. It doesn't show Islam is true, right? But it does show that their explanation doesn't work. So like Saad pointed out, if spirituality is real, it doesn't fit within the naturalistic worldview. Which is why people like him are trying to explain it away. This is very important. What's the difference between explaining something and explaining it away? What's the difference between the two? This is a bit more of a tricky question. What's the difference between these two things?
If you explain away something, it's not real.
Yes. And what if you explain it?
Yeah,
Then it is real. Good. So when you explain it away, you're saying it's not real. It's not a real thing. When you explain it, that means it is a real thing. It is actually a real thing. You have to remember, these people, they want to explain it away. Okay, now, do we want to explain it away, or do we want to explain from it as Muslims? Explain from it. Use it to actually fit within the Islamic worldview. Okay, just a quick thing. Does everyone follow the trail of thought so far? We started off with intro, then we did why we need spirituality, and now we're going into both the theist and the atheist. They both agree spirituality is something. Now they want to try and explain it away, we want to try and explain it. Yes, you were saying?
I haven't yet understood spirituality. How do you define it?
Very good question. Very good question. In fact, I didn't do that. So how do we explain or define spirituality? You guys tell me. I should have done that at the beginning.
Well, so you have a religious experience. You think that there is some higher dimension. There is an objective meaning.
Okay, so what does higher dimension mean?
Well, higher dimension means you think that there are realms that are beyond the physical.
Yes. So you believe there's something beyond the physical. You also said objective.
Objective meaning and purpose.
Okay, what does objective meaning mean?
Well, something that I have an objective meaning, it means that everyone, regardless of what they believe in or where they're coming from, they would agree that this is their truth.
Yes. So it's a meaning which is transcendent. It's not human made. Somebody else had their hand up somewhere. Was it you? Yes.
Spirituality is any act that benefits this world.
Yes.
It doesn't have to do with physical matter.
Yes, very good. Everyone heard him? He said any act which benefits the soul. What's the problem with the soul from a naturalistic perspective? It doesn't exist. It's not mechanical. You can't measure it. You can't put it in a test tube. Yeah? So before we set off on this discussion of how people who subscribe to a scientism worldview try to explain away spirituality, I want to make the distinction between scientism and science, which I asked earlier. Scientism is a worldview. It is a worldview. It is a claim about the world. Okay? Science, on the other hand, is a method. It's a method. Scientism, its primary claim is the only type of knowledge that is meaningful is that which is acquired through the scientific method. Now, initially, it doesn't sound that harmful, but you need to look at the words. It's saying science is the only route of knowledge. That's what's dangerous. If they said, we believe science is a route of knowledge, I would say that's fabulous, right? I have no problem with that. But they're saying actually it is the only form of knowledge. Now, a quick counter to anybody who says this, right? I want you to imagine a cloth, a rectangular cloth, right? That cloth, let's call it reason. And then a small cloth within it, and let's call that science. So you have a rectangular cloth which is called what? Reason. And the small cloth is called within it? Science. Science is a subdomain of reason. At the moment they've been switched. Science and reason is either seen as the same thing, or reason and science, or science is seen as superior and reason is a part of it. When actually reason is the main source of knowledge and science is a subdomain of that. Okay, and we're going to be going through this actual problem. So scientism is not a term which I just came up with. It is a philosophical term used by academics to describe those people who say the only type of knowledge which is meaningful, the only route of knowledge is science. By the way, it's not necessarily a derogatory term. There are some atheists who wear it as a badge of honor. They wear it as a badge of honor, right? There's other atheists who they subscribe to scientism although they've never heard of it, and that's why you have to keep correcting them. So it's a type of worship of science. It's a type of way of thinking which is very restricted. Yeah, it's a type of epistemic cage, if you like, which is forcing you to say that the only thing in life that we can know is meaningful in terms of knowledge is science. Now, one of the things Friedrich Nietzsche, by the way, you guys familiar with Friedrich Nietzsche, famous atheist philosopher who, said God is dead, right? So, Friedrich Nietzsche was not anti-science. He was not anti-science, and he was not religious in any way. However, he said something which I found really funny. He said, a scientific explanation of meaning may be the most stupidest type of meaning. A scientific explanation of meaning may be the most stupidest type of explanation in terms of meaning. Why? Because according to him, it's all mechanical. Right? So you can't get meaning from a leaf. You get a tree, a leaf drops to the right of the tree. Another leaf drops to the left of the tree. Right? What's the meaning? Science can tell you motion, and it can tell you trajectories, but where's meaning, purpose, value? Where's these things? They don't actually exist. So even he understood as a militant atheist that science kills meaning, right? And to look at the world from a scientific perspective, look for meaning, would be actually quite stupid. There's a really horrible case, and by the way, what we're doing right now is we're dismantling scientism, and then we're going to dismantle how scientism, the proponents of scientism, try to explain spirituality. So we're doing, if you like, a two-pronged attack. Yeah, we're first dismantling scientism, and then we're dismantling, even if scientism was true, why scientism and its solutions for spirituality do not work. So anyone read this story? This was quite famous a little while ago. When was this? This was last month. Anyone familiar with this story? So this was there's this child who was left alone at home while their mother went out on a partying spree. right, for like a week, right? And the child actually starved to death. The child actually starved to death, right? Now the mother, she was not insane, she was just selfish, right? She was just selfish. So if you read a story like this, my first question is, how does it make you feel? What do you feel inside?
Disgusted.
Disgusted,
Objectively evil.
evil,
Inhumane.
inhumane.
Sad. Sad.
Who said that? Sad, yeah? Sad. Of course. Who else? Barbaric. Okay, now you have these feelings on a scale of 0 to 10. How strong are these feelings? 10. No discussion. 10. Okay. From a purely scientific perspective, those feelings, those moralities, those objectives, those values, those duties that you have of care towards that child do not exist. They do not exist. The difference between a healthy child being cared and loved for by her mother and a child starving to death in an apartment alone is 0. There is no difference between the two. If we're to take a picture of a healthy child being hugged by the mother and a child starving to death, it is molecules in motion. There is no morality. You cannot use a telescope and measure morality here. So those people who say, we believe in scientism, they cannot account for the existence of objective morals. They cannot account for the existence of, this is a situation which is evil, a child starving to death. This is a situation which is good, a child being hugged and cared for. They cannot say that, because all you have between the difference between the two is different rearrangement of matter. If you're matter, it doesn't matter. There is no meaning. Yeah, now that's a very scary concept. No rational human being would say that these two actions are equal. Yet those people who claim scientism, most of the time they don't even recognize this is one of the implications of scientism. There's no good, there's no evil, there's no moral obligation, there's no moral worth, right? There's no human value from that perspective. Now, why this is ironic is when you ask people who believe in scientism, I believe in scientism. When you ask them, why do you believe in scientism? Why do you believe in scientism and not something else? What's their answer? Their usual answer.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. Okay. So what they're trying to say, that it's true, right? They're trying to say scientism is true. Okay? Now, if someone tries to say scientism is true, I'm following it. If human life has no value, if human life is meaningless, then how can you say truth has any value? Why not follow falsehood? So, there's many ways you can cut the onion, but you'll come to the same conclusion. This type of worldview, it challenges the very essence of being human. Now quickly, can you guys name me some of the most massive events, upheavals in human history that changed the course of human history? Say the last 500 years. Name me some things. Holocaust, fantastic. What else? French Revolution, fantastic. Me Too movement, right? That's now. World wars, fantastic. These are things which are emotional. They have a moral basis, right? These things, social justice warriors, it's about morality. Okay, I'm surprised no one said it, but in the Indian subcontinent, another very momentous occasion happened, which was the largest movement of human history, right? Migration. Anyone know? What's it called? A little thing starting with P? Partition. Fantastic. Surprised it took so long to get that out of you guys. Partition. That was again something based on a moral concept. The idea of justice, right? So what we need to understand is that a scientism worldview, because it gets rid of, scratches away morality, it scratches away the essence of being human. So even if someone says, I love, I'm a person who loves, I'm a humanist, right? Tell them, well, that's just garbage. Sorry, that's just garbage, yeah? Because if there is no morality, there is no difference between love, hate, anxiety, fear, sympathy, empathy. All of these things are on the same level. So that's a high price to pay for anybody that wants to stick to scientism. I want to tell the story of the philosopher Val Plumwood, right? So she has a very interesting story. Anyone familiar with her story? Very, very interesting story. Make sure after this talk you go and read her paper. Her paper's, okay, I'm not going to give you the name, I'll give you the name once I tell you the story. So she was a very important philosopher. She worked on feminism, worked on the environment, she wrote papers, she wrote books, she had a great education, well respected. She went out on a little boat in the water, and the lake, not lake, river, whatever it was, that little place with water that she was, it had crocodiles. And as she was going out, she noticed that there was a crocodile that came up and it looked at her. And she writes poetically, she says it had golden eyes, right? Now that golden-eyed crocodile, first initially, there's ways you can avoid crocodiles and stuff, but in her case, it started attacking the canoe. It started attacking and attacking and attacking. She says it felt like that whole experience felt like what? A eternity, because she was gripped at one point by the crocodile by the legs, right? And it dragged her into the water. And crocodiles, they work by short bursts of intensive energy. They don't have like long-term, they're not like marathon runners, yeah? So it was trying to drag her into the water. And that moment for her, she writes, was like an eternity. She thankfully survived. Once she survived, she wrote a paper called On Being Prey, something like this, right? You can Google it, you'll find it, right? Very poetic. And what she says is at that moment in her life, she recognized she was just food. I want you to just think about that. She wasn't a great philosopher. She wasn't a feminist. She wasn't an environmentalist. She was just food. And that profoundly impacted her philosophy. That profoundly impacted the way she looked at the world. Now I want you to recognize something. From a purely Darwinian point of view, from a point of view in which we just want to look at the world mechanically, yeah? It doesn't matter really if you're a philosopher or if you're just a poor farmer living in Philippines who has a cow and they live off their life from the land and they die. There's no difference between, say, Isaac Newton, who contributed a massive amount to the world in terms of knowledge, and a philosopher like her, and somebody from a village in the Philippines. Right? Not devaluing anyone here, but I'm just saying, from a purely fitness perspective, the only thing that matters is how many fertile offspring you leave. It's not how great your philosophy is. From a purely mechanical point of view, she was right. You are just food. You are just food. Okay, now I want you guys to tell me something. Again, we're deconstructing scientism here. You have a person who draws a circle, and then they draw another circle on top of the very same circle, so it doesn't look any different. Anyone with me so far? Then they draw another circle on top of the same circle, so it looks the same. And they do this for 50 years. Raise your hands if you want to do something like that for the rest of your life. No? No takers? Okay. There's another person who spends their life doing important scientific experiments to discover the nature of reality. 50 years. Raise your hands if you think there's a difference between these two. One person making an eternal circle, one person benefiting humanity through knowledge? Is there a difference? From a scientism point of view, there is no objective difference between these two statements. There is no meaning, there is no value, there is no purpose, right? The only meaning according to them you can come up with is your own subjective meaning. If one person says my meaning in life is to do science, another one says my meaning in life is to make the flourishment of mangoes, right? They're all equal. My purpose in life is just to draw circles. Absolutely pointless, absolutely meaningless. Which is why I respect far more people like Nietzsche, because they were honest atheist philosophers, than people who come in now and they pretend to talk about human rights and civilization and progress. Like an atheist friend of mine who became a Muslim said to me, if the world, and he's telling when he was an atheist and he's trying to explain the atheist worldview, he said, if the world is pointless, how can you make pointless better? It's a simple question. Because today, one of the idols, one of the taghut today is progress. Progress, we need to progress, yeah? That's one of the atheist manifestos. Now, we don't have a problem with progress. But from their perspective, there is no problem. There is a big problem. The problem is, if the world is pointless, all your life, you did anything, it's still going to be pointless. There's actually no point. So that's another high price you have to pay if you believe in scientism. Okay. Right now, as I'm talking, which organ of your body are you using? What takes up the most energy in a session like this? Your brain. Unless you're, I don't know, somewhere playing Angry Birds, yeah? You should be using your brain. Even if you're playing Angry Birds, you would be using your brain. Okay. So, you are using your brain. You are thinking. You are using your reason. One of the problems with scientism is scientism cannot give an account for reason. It has to assume reason. Scientism, those proponents of it, they have to assume that their rational cognitive faculties are reliable. They can never prove them. Now you can come up with philosophical, reasonable arguments, but that's not science. Using science alone, as someone who subscribes to scientism, you cannot even justify your own reason and why it's reliable. Now the problem with human beings, and this is a problem for scientism, is eat, survive, reproduce. This is what other creatures are more than happy doing. And if you look at all of life from a mechanical point of view, creatures are living and surviving, eating and dying and procreating and survival and reproduction and preservation of genes. That's all happening. But then one creature comes along and says, what's the point of all of this? Why the hell am I here? Right? What's going on? So this is again a big problem for scientism. Why are we like this? Why are you sitting here listening to me talking about science and spirituality when you should be focused on survival and reproduction? Right? You should be focused on something else. So clearly there's something that doesn't fit within the scientism worldview. What's interesting is there's layers upon layers of problem of the baseless worldview of scientism. So even though it's a baseless worldview, it still has layers upon layers of problems. And one of the problems, which I found very interesting, is pointed out by an atheist philosopher who himself subscribes to scientism. But he says something quite funny. The most serious obstacle facing atheists when we set out to answer the persistent questions for ourselves is one erected by Mother Nature herself. Ironically, this barrier to scientism results from the very Darwinian evolutionary process that theism has to reject. He, in his book, An Atheist's Guide to Reality, he says, natural selection, Mother Nature, it's made us have lots and lots of false beliefs. Which is why, according to him, because according to him, science gives you truth, it's actually harder to do science because of the way that evolution has actually hardwired us, because it hardwired us to be more susceptible to accept, according to him, false religious beliefs. And this is more than ironic, and he does actually speak about this quite candidly, which others don't. So this is a serious problem for scientism. Okay, so now we get on to, we've already spoke about how science is not the only root of knowledge. There's many different roots of knowledge, and even the idea of scientism is self-contradictory. But nonetheless, if scientism was to be applied, they would try to give a evolutionary explanation and naturalist selection type of explanation for spirituality. So how and why did religion evolve? They would say, well, we have an evolutionary explanation, and they are open that this is something that they can explain. Now, a quick thing. Someone amongst you may say, but we can explain that through culture. Or someone decided they wanted power, right? That's why they made religion. You know, the famous Marx thing, religion is the what of the masses? Opiate, right? But the problem is that doesn't go far enough. If you want to give a proper naturalistic explanation, you need to start off from a bottom up, right? Processing. We need to look at what is the origin. So they try and give a naturalistic origin. The problem right from the onset is, within science, there is a rule known as methodological naturalism. Cutting the long story short, methodological naturalism means when we speak about human nature within science, within anthropology, within psychology, within any of science, we cannot mention the soul. We cannot mention God or the soul or anything immaterial. Yeah? Nothing immaterial can be mentioned. Okay? Nothing immaterial can be mentioned. So what we're going to see is that you're not really getting an objective perspective from scientism. Now, I found this interesting video. For anyone that's interested, it's called The Believing Brain, Evolution, Neuroscience and the Spiritual Instinct by World Science Festival, right? So this had Brian Greene, it had a whole bunch of other evolutionary psychologists who are very famous, and they're all speaking about the spiritual instinct, or the lack of, according to some of them, right? So they're speaking about how do we explain away what? Spirituality. Now, they're trying to explain away spirituality. Now, I want to ask you a question. If we have a presenter like Brian Greene, very famous, we have 4 distinguished scientists, does this or does this not look like a very objective, fair, justified way of looking at a problem? You know, you have a panel of people who disagree and you have a presenter. Doesn't it look quite balanced? Raise your hands if you think this looks balanced. Okay, I may have pre-framed it, so it may not work now. Raise your hands if at first pass this looks like, yeah, you know, they're having a discussion, they're disagreeing, this looks fair. Raise your hands if you think something like this. Okay, so this has still managed to fool some people. All of them are atheists. So automatically, they're not going to explain spirituality, they're going to explain it away. And in fact, if you watch this video, they all make it clear. He makes it clear in the beginning he's an atheist, all the rest of them make it clear that they're atheists. So then of course, they're only going to give you a non-naturalistic understanding of spirituality. So their panel represents what's going on in evolutionary psychology at the moment. What's happening in evolutionary psychology is there's 2 camps. There's the camp that says religion is adaptive. What does adaptive mean? I'm sure the people who spoke about evolution earlier will tell me.
Well, it helps you make more babies.
That's a very nice way of putting it. Helps you have more babies. Yes. Fertile babies, right? Fertile babies. It's adaptive because it leads to more offspring over time. And it is something which has benefit. So the argument from one aspect of evolutionary psychology is religion reduces stress, increases your life, increases your reproductive success, and is a great way of having social cohesion. Okay, doesn't this sound like the exact opposite of what atheists say about religion? Raise your hands if you automatically realize there's like a contradiction. There's like a contradiction going on here. The new atheist movement, they're the very same people telling us religion causes what? Stress. Religion causes what? Violence, right? The same people, atheists, are sort of saying, no, what it is it reduces stress, it increases life, because they have to give some sort of explanation. So obviously there's a problem with this. But however, let's look at the other side. The other side of evolutionary psychologists, and remember both sides are atheists, they have to give us a non-naturalistic explanation. They say, no, this doesn't make any sense, right? Steven Pinker, who was there at this talk, he's, the argument that they're coming up with, the people who are saying it's adaptive, they're saying, look, it's giving us false beliefs. Religion's giving us false beliefs, but they're adaptive. They reduce stress, they make us live longer and stuff like this. However, Pinker gives this really funny reply, yeah? He says, how is a false belief supposed to reduce your stress? Or supposed to be more adaptive, right? In other words. He says, if you come across a rabbit, but you have the false belief, actually no, you come across a lion, a predatory cat, he says, right? And you believe that it's not actually a predatory cat. It's not there that's going to eat you. It's actually a harmless rabbit. He says that's only going to increase your stress, right? That's not going to decrease your stress.
So that's only viable if your eyes are closed.
Sorry?
You would see the cat.
Yes.
If you open your eyes.
Yes.
Then why does it have he have to believe that it's a harmless rabbit instead of a cat?
No, what he's saying is that the other evolutionary psychologists are saying it's okay, false beliefs reduce stress. But he's saying false beliefs will increase stress. Do you see? Are you clear? It's okay, you can carry on, but the evolutionary psychologists, they are saying something different. I think you're talking about perception. You're saying you should be able to see the cat. So you should be able to see the rabbit, not as a predatory, yeah? He's speaking about false beliefs, not about perception. Although there's a whole discussion about reliability of our senses and stuff like this because of evolution. Okay, now in terms of social cohesion, religion brings people together. Yeah, religion's fantastic. Religion brings us together, right? So for people, why do we believe in God? Because the idea of God is adaptive, because if everyone in a tribe, they believe in the same God, then they all come together and they're good at what? Hunting, gathering, foraging. They have higher reproductive success. Yeah? So this is another classical argument made by evolutionary psychologists to explain spirituality. Oh, the belief in religion, the belief in spirituality, it helped people to come together, right? So that's the one camp. Now, Barbara King, she's part of the other camp, which says religion is not adaptive. It's an evolutionary byproduct. She says, okras, killer sharks, right? These killer sharks, they are amazing at cooperation. They're amazing at cooperation. Yet she says they don't need a belief in God. They don't need religion or religious rituals to have social cohesion. She says they don't need that. So as we go here, each one of these arguments, religion reduces stress, increases life, increases reproductive success, social cohesion, and then you get the other evolutionary biologists saying, no nonsense, false beliefs make it harder to survive. There's many different examples you can come up with. My false belief, 2 + 2 is, 1 + 1 + 1 is 1, 3, or I don't know, I was with a group of philosophers here, yeah? Let's pretend to be normal, insane Homo sapiens, yeah? 1 + 1 + 1 is 3, thank God, yeah? 3. Okay. If I have a false belief that 1 + 1 + 1 is 2. So what I do is that I am a Homo sapien staring at a cave which I want to make my home. And I see 3 lions walking into the cave. 2 of the lions decide to come back. How many lions are left? 1. But according to my false belief, there's no lion in there. And then I go in there and I become Kima, right? So a false belief is, according to the other camp, it's not going to help you survive. Now the thing is, the problem with both camps, like I said in the beginning, they try and explain it away. Even though they try and explain it away and they want people to, because they've explained it away, they want people to believe in the naturalistic explanation. However, here's the most ironic part. The most atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic society that ever existed is, clue here? Soviets. Soviets, right? The Soviets, they had state atheism. They taught Darwinism. They taught feminism. They taught all of these types of materialistic ideas. However, they still had as a state religious rituals. Who's this handsome man? The one who's dead, by the way. Who's that handsome man? Who? Stalin? Nope. One before Stalin? Lenin. Okay. When Lenin died, if you're a pure materialist, Lenin is matter, he's dead, so there's no value. He's just dead. What do you do? For hygiene reasons, bury him. What did the Soviets decide to do? Preserve him. Is he still preserved to today? He is. He's still lying in state. This picture's from 1924. It's 2020. How many years is that? 96 or something, yeah? Hopefully. So, he is still, you can go to Russia, you can go to Moscow, he's still there. And people, if you look at the funeral of him, it looks like a religious funeral. His statues were all over the Soviet Union. Even today in North Korea, the leader, although it's a state atheist society, it's made the leader into this type of demigod, right? So this sanctification instinct that we have to sanctify something beyond us, you can't get rid of it even if you apply state atheism. And in fact, you know, the new atheists, the ones who came after 9/11, they say, oh yeah, forget those guys. Like, I've noticed this. Whenever I debate these atheists, yeah, they're like, forget them. Forget the Soviets. Yeah, we're different. We're different. We're not like them. They're actually exactly the same. They're actually exactly the same. You will find amongst the most important atheists in the world today, new atheists in the world today, speaking about spirituality. I came across these books, which I thought was really interesting, yeah. I didn't actually know about the other 2 books. I knew about, obviously, Sam Harris. Sam Harris, famous new atheist, he wrote the book a few years ago, Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. Now, he's not a philosopher. He's actually quite rubbish at that. I mean, he has got, you know, a bit of background in philosophy, but he's rubbish, yeah. So he's always come up with really stupid arguments like The Moral Landscape, yeah. But what I was surprised at is the other 2 books, they're actually written by atheist philosophers. And you'd expect them to be a lot more rigorous in their thinking, but they're arguing for atheist spirituality. And the problem with atheist spirituality is, what did we say earlier? If spirituality is real, then what's the case with atheism? It's not a trick question. If spirituality is real, naturalistic atheism must be false. Okay, why? We already said this, but just to make sure you're awake. Why?
Because spiritual components do not appear in our best physics theory.
Yes. Can you make that sentence into English? He's talking like a physicist, yeah? Something about components, matter. English yard, please.
You don't see spirituality.
You don't see spirituality.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
all about physical world.
It's all about the physical world. Fantastic. So if spiritual, okay, you need to repeat with me to make sure that you're awake, or else I'm going to feel like you're not interested in the lecture. Yeah. If spirituality is real, atheism is false. Thank you. It is false. Fantastic. So, if atheism is true, then spirituality has to be false, and vice versa. So the fact that they live in this enlightened post-religion world, why are they still craving for spirituality? Why are they craving for meaning, purpose, value? I'm really surprised that they don't see the contradiction. They actually do not see the contradiction. What they've done is they've just changed the labels. They don't want to say religion because religion sounds religious. So what they're saying is, oh, spirituality. Okay, what's spirituality? Being one with the universe. Well, that's naturalism because we're just matter. No. Being one with the the exact same sentence lexically. What the hell do you mean? No, one with. What are you talking about? Like honestly, you know when you try and pin them down, because they're trying to give you a definition of spirituality that's no. They're trying to give you a spirituality which is non-religious. Yeah? They're trying to give you a naturalistic. Now, Saad, you've done physics here. Time, space, matter, energy. Is there anything else they can refer to?
No, they can't.
They can't. Time, space, matter, energy. Any physicist will tell you.
Just an example of, remember the other day you gave me, like you have a microscope, you're trying to find a biological cell.
Yeah.
A binocular, basically.
Yeah.
Using a binocular. And you will not be able to find it.
The only conceptual tools you have is time, space, matter, and energy. Where on earth are you going to get spirituality? It's not, doesn't exist as part of the universe. So now my question to you is, how do we explain their behavior? They've been trying to explain our behavior. Now let's put the shoe on the other foot. How do we explain their behavior? Although they're atheists, they're still trying to connect with something greater. How do we explain it?
The fitra.
Fitra. Somebody else says something?
Innate.
Innate? Innate, what is innate?
Innate ability to crave for spirituality.
Yes, innate ability to create for spirituality. However, we're trying to be content, but the answer that you get from evolutionary psychology, the answer that you get is, look, we were not made for contentment. We were not made for contentment. We were made, designed by Mother Nature, Darwinism, whatever you want to call it, for something a lot more mechanical. Raphael Yuba, he's a senior lecturer at King's College, London, he explains it this way. Humans are not designed to be happy or even content. Instead, we are designed primarily to survive and reproduce. Like every other creature in the natural world, a state of contentment is discouraged by nature. In fact, before I continue reading this, like survival and reproduction, yeah? Like we're here in Pakistan, yeah? How difficult is it to get married? Is it easy? Let me tell you something, right? Bacteria, here's how they mate. No, mate. Here's how they reproduce. They have asexual reproduction. They just start splitting, right? That's quite effective. How do animals, right? You get a pig, you get another pig, the male pig, okay, I'm not going to X-rated stuff, but that's it. They have kids. What do you do? As Asians, as Pakistanis, what do you guys do? Is it simple? Sorry? I believe, and I made a video about this earlier, and the video is called Asian Weddings versus Darwinism. I believe Asian weddings, Pakistani weddings, is evidence against Darwinism. Because to get married, you need to buy her gold, you need to have a nice job, you need to, give money to a sister-in-law so they get off the stage, all this crap, yeah? What's the point? From a Darwinian point of view, you just, what's the point of all this nonsense, yeah? So, human behavior doesn't make sense from a Darwinian perspective, but contentment, let's go back to it, right? Humans are not designed to be happy or even content. Instead, we are designed primarily to survive and reproduce. Like every other creature in the natural world, a state of contentment is discouraged by nature because it would lower our guard against possible threats to our survival. So the thing is, contentment from a Darwinian perspective would make you more susceptible to predators, to other human beings. So I want you to recognize something. Who wants to be happy? Raise your hands. You don't want to be happy? What's your name? What's her name? Yes, what's your name? No, the one here. Hina. Do you want to be happy, Hina? Okay, good. So I made her say she wants to be happy. Forcibly. Okay, raise your hands if you want to be anxious and worried and stressed. One guy. Okay. Majority of people, happiness. From an evolutionary perspective, happiness, even though Hina wants to be happy, an evolutionary psychologist will tell her, Hina, it doesn't matter. You want to be happy. Happiness is no more valuable than being anxious or stressful. It's whatever leads to the greatest reproduction. Right? Whatever leads to the greatest fertile offspring. So happiness and stress and all the other emotions in between, positive and negative, they're all on the same level. Whatever helps you survive. That's what he's basically saying. So this whole idea of life, liberty, and what's the third thing? Anyone study law here? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? That wouldn't make any sense from a Darwinian perspective. Right? Happiness is no more valuable than being stressful. Okay, what's the name of this guy? Stop pretending. I don't watch films. I study all day. I have a GPA of 3.9. I have a GPA of 4.5 out of 4. Yeah? Forget that. Yeah? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? Sorry, what did you say? Who said, what's his name? Ryan Gosling. What's your name? Maheen. Round of applause for Maheen. Louder. Come on, guys. Round of applause. That's being authentic. Yeah? Everyone's like, I don't know what Netflix is. I don't know who he is. I don't know where I am. Yeah? No. Just be honest. Yeah? Ryan Gosling. Very handsome looking guy. So, what do you say your name is? Maheen. Which one of these two Ryan Goslings, right? Which one of these two Ryan Goslings is more important than the other? Which one? The right one. This right one. Why did he say this one? Why not this one? You think it's a what? Allahu Akbar. She said it's a statue. It is actually a statue. I'm actually really surprised, mashallah. It is yeah, let's have a round of applause for that, mashallah. Yeah. This is a wax model. Okay, now, Mahi, did you say? Maheen. Maheen, if this Ryan Gosling was hit by lightning and that Ryan Gosling was hit by lightning, would you be more upset at this one or the other one? Left one. So you don't mind if this one just melts because it's made of wax. Why would you mind if the other one? But what does human mean from a scientism point of view? Nothing. It's actually, there is no difference between these two. You have matter being rearranged in a different way. There is no soul. So if you really want to cheese off an atheist, just tell them, would you eat a dead body? Just ask them, would you eat a dead body? No, I wouldn't eat a dead body. Would you have a chicken sandwich? Yeah? Well, that's a dead body. Why sentimentalism? Yeah? Why choose sentimentalism? Be authentic, yeah? So what it is we have the fitra explanation. Okay, I need to wrap up and we'll do Q&A, inshallah, yeah? So, the fitra explanation is what? We were created to worship Allah. We were created for a spiritual higher goal. And spirituality is what? Loving God, having a fear of God, having hope in God. These three things. Love, fear and hope. And these things are immaterial, non-physical. So our fitra explanation is why there's so many religions in the world and why even atheists act like religious people and try and be spiritual is because Allah created us with a nature to connect with something higher, with Him. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, every child is born upon the fitra, and their parents, their society, they alter them, change them. So it's the same fitra trying to come out, but it's coloured by different societal lenses. So science is the experiment, spirituality is the experience. Ibn Haytham was the first scientist. It wasn't Galileo, Kepler, Newton, these guys. It was Ibn Haytham. And Ibn Haytham said that he did science to get closer to God. So he did not see a problem between spirituality and science. There was no problem. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, reflect upon creation, do not reflect upon Allah. But he told us to reflect upon creation. So studying nature, Islam gives you a moral imperative to study nature. If you're just a piece of matter, you don't have to do science. If you just believe everything is meaningless. But as a Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who are what? The best are the ones who bring the most benefit to humans. So a scientist, like I know somebody, you can actually go to the IRA YouTube page and put him in, Dr. Farid Khan. He does science and he's dedicated his life to doing science. Why? Because of the Quranic verse, whoever saves the life of one saves the lives of all. So science is the experiment, spirituality is the experience, and the experiment is enhanced by the experience. And spirituality is a real thing. It's not going to be explained away. And even those who are explaining it away, they still refer to spirituality. And the reality of spirituality can be explained because we're not just physical. We're also made of a ruh. We're also made up of a soul, which is immaterial. And that soul, it can't be fed through a chapli kebab. Yeah? It has to be fed by something immaterial, which for us is the remembrance of Allah. And as Allah says in the Quran, verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Everything good I've said is from Allah, every mistake is from myself. Jazakallah khair for listening.